G'day viewers. In this video presentation we're going to explore the fundamental manner in which element 115 may be manipulating gravity. In order to do this, we shall first conceptually establish how normal matter behaves and its relationship to gravity. Once we've completed this, we can tackle the manner in which element 115 may be manipulating gravity. However, I should emphasise that the solution I'm going to present is conjecture. I also need to stress that a complete mathematical construct exists supporting the concepts I'm going to present. I will place the relevant links in the description, so please try to find the time to watch all of the recommended episodes. The place I'm going to start is the zero-point field. The zero-point field is the ground state of the quantum vacuum. If we strip away all the matter and energy from the universe, the space-time remaining would exist in its ground state. This ground state is termed the zero-point field. The next thing we're going to consider is the Casimir effect, which walks hand in hand with the zero-point field. Even with all the matter and energy in the universe stripped away, the Casimir effect will still exist. In other words, the Casimir effect, which is a measurable effect, acts as a pressure relief mechanism for the zero-point field. Hence, the zero-point field feeds the Casimir effect. But what feeds the zero-point field? Where does the zero-point field get its energy from? If the zero-point field wasn't receiving energy from somewhere, then our complete understanding of physics would break. Why? Because the law of conservation of energy would be broken. So something, somehow, is feeding and recharging the zero-point field. What might it be? To answer this question, we need to understand that the zero-point field is a layer of reality which we can access via the Casimir effect. It's a part of the observable universe. This means that whatever is feeding the zero-point field must be a part of the unobservable universe. Another layer of reality must exist beneath the zero-point field. If not, where does it get its energy from? We know from the Casimir effect that the zero-point field exists in 3 dimensions, 3D. Hence, we propose that an extra spatial dimension is required, which we term the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. Thus, we propose that space-time contains 4 spatial dimensions, not 3, plus 1 of time. So, in terms of GR, we're saying that space-time is 5D, not 4D, as it is currently considered. The 5th general relativity dimension is termed the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. Therefore, the 3 spatial dimensions of general relativity must be feeding the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. The obvious question now becomes, what is feeding the 3 spatial dimensions of general relativity? Well, let's break this question down. What bends the 3 spatial dimensions of general relativity? Obviously, the answer is mass. If the entire process that we've described so far, all the way down to the Casimir effect and the zero-point field, needs to be a continuous process in order to preserve the law of conservation of energy, then matter is required to lose mass energy to the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. So a simplified version of the process I'm describing looks like this. Step 1, the Big Bang creates all matter. Step 2, all matter radiates gravitons, losing mass in the process. Our version of gravitons possess mass and do not mediate forces as per standard quantum mechanics. Instead, they interact exclusively with the quantum vacuum. That is, they interact exclusively with the space-time manifold described by general relativity. Step 3. These gravitons are absorbed into the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. That is, they are absorbed into the 4th spatial dimension. We observe this absorption process as the space-time curvature associated with general relativity. This space-time curvature does not exist in a permanent state. Its curvature is sustained by a steady feed of radiated gravitons. If this were not the case, then an infinite amount of energy is required to have been stored in the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy, that is, in the 4th spatial dimension, at the instant of the Big Bang, in order to power the zero-point field and consequently the Casimir effect. The problem with infinite anything is that it doesn't exist. It cannot be experimentally confirmed. In physics, when we require an infinite quantity to make a theory work, we have a problem and the theory should be revised. This isn't my opinion, this is standard physics. Step 4. The dark reservoir of quantum potential energy, that is the fourth spatial dimension, leaks energy back into the observable universe via the Casimir effect associated with the zero-point field. This is what is driving accelerated cosmological expansion. The process I've outlined leads to a cyclic cosmology model. In fact, it gives the Sir Roger Penrose model of conformal cyclic cosmology the matter evaporation mechanism it needs in order to work. Given that Sir Roger Penrose is a Nobel laureate, our matter evaporation process, which mechanically enables the Penrose model to work, is a very good sign indeed. So, we have at least one Nobel laureate in general agreement with our approach. In addition to this, in episodes 34 and 35, we address and solve the many orders of magnitude problem. This is a long-standing problem in physics, dealing with the 42 orders of magnitude difference between the electric and gravitational forces. In our journey, we show that for normal matter, the electric force is 90 degrees out of phase with the gravitational force. However, we cannot distinguish whether this phase difference is spatial, temporal, or extra-dimensional in constitution. Okay, now that we've explained the evaporation process for normal matter and the 90-degree phase difference between the electric and gravitational forces, we can move more directly onto element 115. So here's a summary of the key points we know so far. Point 1. We must assume that a stable isotope of element 115 exists. Point 2. Element 115 must be losing mass, just like normal matter, because element 115 is composed of normal matter, that is, protons and neutrons. Point 3. The electric force is 90 degrees out of phase with the gravitational force. However, what if the geometry of the element 115 nucleus modifies the effective phase difference between the electric and gravitational forces? What if the effective phase difference isn't 90 degrees, but 0 degrees or 180 degrees? Perhaps it's this consequential phase difference which enables the amplification of gravity A wave to appear just like microwave. Remember how I mentioned earlier that we cannot distinguish whether this phase difference is spatial, temporal, or extra-dimensional in constitution? Well, if we assume that the effective phase difference can be modified so that it can be manipulated just like microwaves, then this is only possible if the phase difference is temporal, not spatial or extra-dimensional. Perhaps one of these phase difference configurations, that is 0 or 180 degrees, means that element 115 acts as some sort of quantum vacuum inhibitor, which retards the gravitons being ejected by the Earth from entering the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy, consequently flattening space-time curvature at the surface of the Earth, thereby enabling the hovering function. Thus, this would mean that inside the spacecraft, everything exists at the same gravitational potential, that is, there is no sense of gravitational direction, and the occupants would not experience inertial effects. They would not have been slammed against the walls of the spacecraft, just as Lazar claims. But what leads me to suggest the idea of quantum vacuum inhibition? Well, cancelling the so-called gravity B waves emanating from the Earth does not mean destroying energy. The energy from the Earth, which curves space-time, is still there, so whatever element 115 is doing, it can only be adding to the energy contained within any given volume at the surface of the Earth. Hence, whatever is actually happening, it can only be a case of element 115 reducing the gradient in the gravity field at the surface of the Earth to 0. So, if the energy associated with space-time curvature at the surface of the Earth hasn't been destroyed and is still there, as per the law of conservation of energy, what's actually happening? Well, the answer to this lies in quantum mechanics and the concept of probability amplitudes. Probability amplitudes are quite a complicated concept in quantum mechanics, so I'm not going to cover it here. However, I will provide a high-level conceptualization of it. Basically, probability amplitudes refers to the probability of a particle arriving at a certain location when emitted from its source. What this means is that the amplitude of each wave in the Fourier distribution we have utilised to quantize gravity represents the proportion of gravitons being irradiated by the Earth at its surface and being absorbed by the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. That is, the fourth spatial dimension. However, this same amplitude value also denotes the probability of a graviton being released into the observable universe, that is, into the zero-point field by the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. This means that the local space-time curvature surrounding matter is in energetic equilibrium with the matter it's surrounding. Cosmological expansion ensures that, overall, on a cosmological scale, the universe exists in slight disequilibrium and is hunting for equilibrium via the action of accelerated cosmological expansion. Let's now run the numbers. At any mathematical point in any gravitational field, the population of gravitons being absorbed by the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy at the fundamental harmonic, that is, the first harmonic, is approximately 64%. At the third harmonic, the population of gravitons being absorbed is 21%. At the fifth harmonic, it's 13%. At the seventh harmonic, it's 9%. By the time we get to the 415th harmonic, that is the Lazar harmonic, only 0.15% of gravitons are being absorbed by the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. And for the case of the surface of the Earth specifically, by the time we get to the last harmonic in the spectrum, the proportion of gravitons being absorbed is 10 to the power of minus 27%. When we add the effect of all these harmonics together, the probability of gravitons being absorbed by the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy at the surface of the Earth is 100%. Conversely, the probability of the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy releasing a graviton into the observable universe via the zero-point field at the surface of the Earth mirrors the behaviour of the absorption process. This does not mean that the zero-point field emits an equal number of gravitons as it absorbs. It means that the proportion of gravitons being emitted via the zero-point field equals the proportion being absorbed. In other words, 64% of X is being absorbed, then 64% of Y is being emitted, but the value of X does not equal the value of Y, so on and so forth for each harmonic. This is a required condition in order for a Fourier distribution describing a constant function to hold universally true. So, what does all this mean for the way that element 115 may be working? Well, it means that element 115 may work by interfering with the graviton absorption process associated with the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy and the spontaneous emission of gravitons from the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy into the observable universe via the zero-point field. In other words, in the language of quantum mechanics, element 115 may affect the graviton probability amplitudes associated with a quantized gravitational acceleration field. You can find more information about our concept of quantum vacuum inhibition in episode 16 of our Bob Lazar playlist. Okay, let's now walk through the key concepts with the aid of some graphics.
The first key concept we're going to look at is the link between the zero-point field and the layer of inaccessible reality beneath it, termed the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. However, if the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy feeds the zero-point field, what is feeding energy to the dark reservoir? To answer this question, we first propose that one pair of conjugate photons constitutes one graviton, and that baryonic matter evaporates via graviton radiation. This mechanism feeds the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. In other words, baryonic matter radiates populations of gravitons which are absorbed by the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy via the zero-point field interface. General relativity interprets this absorption as space-time curvature. Hence, the mechanism we have described is isomorphic to general relativity. However, as one might expect, the store of gravitons within matter is finite. This means that all matter possesses a minimum gravitational lifetime. Please review episode 19 if this concept interests you. The important takeaways from this illustration are: 1. All matter acts as an energy source. 2. All matter evaporates via graviton radiation. 3. The gravitons radiated by matter are absorbed by the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy via the zero-point field interface. This means that the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy acts as an energy sink. 4. the zero-point field interface is a bidirectional information layer, allowing gravitons to enter the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy, but also acting as a pressure release valve, which we perceive as the Casimir effect. To ensure that the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy inflates very gradually, the zero-point field releases energy back into the physical universe to drive the experimentally observed accelerated cosmological expansion. Let's now have a quick look at gravity A and B waves. In episode 14, we derived the value of gravity A wave pulse frequency claimed by Bob Lazar almost precisely. Lazar claims a value of 7.46 Hz, and we calculated a value of 7.43 Hz. It's important to understand that the gravity A wave pulse frequency is equal to the sum of the first 415 modes of the gravity B wave environment. To describe the situation simply, element 115 atoms naturally generate an EM-like signal at 11.44 GHz, which is amplified, then pulse released at a frequency matching the gravity B environment of the Earth and phase shifted as required. We expect this phase shifting to be 180 degrees. Let's now revisit episode 6. We need to do this in order to explain the way element 115 may be enabling the hovering function of the surface of the Earth. In the bottom left-hand corner of this illustration, we see the quantum potential energy associated with the zero-point field. The zero-point field is the physical manifestation of the quantum potential energy released into the physical universe when the quantum vacuum is in its ground state. We manifestly observe this process in the Casimir effect. The illustration depicts the amplitude and frequency spectra associated with the available quantum potential energy, formatted in accordance with the Fourier distribution as described by the unit harmonic operator in episode 2. Each wave function denotes a population of virtual photons and exists in conjugate pairs as indicated and required for net zero gain, hence the term zero point. These wave functions mean that at any instant in time, populations of virtual photons pop into existence, but so do an equivalent population of virtual photons, 180 degrees out of phase. Consequently, no EM radiation is ever experimentally observed, mysteriously appearing from nowhere. The amplitude of each wave function denotes the probability of a population of photons popping into existence. As you can see, the probability of emergence into reality is significantly greater at lower frequencies than it is at higher frequencies. That is, the higher up the frequency spectrum we look, the lower the probability of virtual photons popping into existence. And as we have already established, for perfectly flat spacetime geometry, the harmonic cutoff frequency tends to infinity. This also means that its probability amplitude tends to zero. In other words, it is impossible for photons of infinite frequency to exist in the physical universe, hence the universe cannot catastrophically collapse. So, what have we achieved with this explanation? Well, we have described the virtual photon creation-annihilation process occurring in the quantum vacuum at the surface of the Earth, but this is only half the story. Now, we need to consider and describe what the Earth is doing to the quantum vacuum. When we add matter to the zero-point field, a major change occurs. The quantum vacuum becomes polarized by the presence of matter and compresses the frequency range of the zero-point field. The lower spectral frequency limit is upshifted from 0 Hz, and the upper spectral limit is downshifted from infinity. Both alternate spectral limits are mass energy dependent. However, the structural format of the Fourier distribution is preserved. In other words, the mathematical description doesn't change. The Fourier distribution is preserved, but its lower and upper frequency limits have been modified due to the addition of matter. We call this polarized form of the quantum vacuum the polarizable vacuum, and is represented by the gravitational harmonic operator appearing in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. To express what is happening in simple terms, the Earth is radiating gravitons and the quantum vacuum is absorbing them. So, everything we've talked about on this slide is a prelude to probabilities and proportions. Let's have a look at what this entails. In this frame, we see that when the amplitude and frequency spectra are summed, we obtain the unit harmonic operator. However, what is important to recognise is that the amplitude spectrum depicted represents two physical and simultaneous processes. The first process relates to virtual photon creation annihilation at the surface of the Earth, that is, the probability of at least one virtual photon popping into existence at each harmonic. Don't forget that a virtual photon pair is what we have defined as a graviton in a previous slide. The second process relates to the proportion of gravitons radiated by the Earth being absorbed by the quantum vacuum at the surface of the Earth at each harmonic. We can see from the harmonic examples that probabilities and proportions are maximal at low harmonics and minimal at high harmonics. In the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, we see some calculated values represented probabilities and proportions. We covered this in the introduction, but we'll cover it once again now. We can see that 64% of all gravitons being emitted at any point in a gravitational acceleration field, like the surface of the Earth, are being emitted at the fundamental harmonic. Similarly, we also see that 21% of the graviton population is being emitted at the third harmonic, 13% at the fifth harmonic, and so on. Conversely, these same numbers mean something a little different from the perspective of energy flow in the opposite direction. That is, energy flowing from the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy into the observable universe via the zero-point field interface. This process is manifested by the Casimir effect, which is observable and measurable. So, the probability of a virtual photon pair associated with the Casimir effect popping into existence at the fundamental frequency is 64%. Similarly, the probability of this occurring at 3 times the fundamental frequency is 21%, and at 5 times the fundamental frequency is 13%, so on and so forth. It's important to note that for both of these processes, the probabilities and proportions sum to 100%. This means that for every point in any gravitational acceleration field, 100% of the gravitons emitted by matter get absorbed by the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. Similarly, it also means that the probability of the Casimir effect existing at the same point is 100%. Let's now talk about quantum vacuum inhibition. By targeting the 415th harmonic, all harmonics from 1 to 415 are interfered with due to the Fourier summation process associated with the unit harmonic operator. Therefore, with the appropriate phase shifting of the amplified element 115 signal, 3 possibilities must exist. Number 1. All gravitonic wave functions from the first harmonic to the 415th harmonic experience destructive interference, thus preventing quantum vacuum absorption of radiated gravitons and consequently disrupting the space-time curvature associated with general relativity. Number 2, all virtual photon creation annihilation events experience destructive interference and disrupt the Casimir effect. And number 3, both of these mechanisms occur simultaneously. Therefore, what is our conclusion? Well, since the space-time curvature associated with general relativity and the Casimir effect cannot be dissociated from one another, element 115 must act as a quantum vacuum inhibitor by disrupting the wave functions illustrated on screen. This means that, in principle, during hovering tests at the surface of the Earth, observers may be able to detect a dim low-frequency hum at 7.46 Hz when utilising the appropriate detection equipment. The lower frequency limit of human hearing is approximately 20 Hz, so it is probably unlikely that humans will be able to audibly detect this dim hum without the assistance of technology. However, it may be possible to feel this noise in one's body, much like a subwoofer. Okay, now that we've described quantum vacuum inhibition, what might it look like in terms of an illustration? Here we see the depiction of a classical transverse electromagnetic plane wave. You can see that the electric field wave propagates perpendicular to the magnetic field wave. You can also see the magneto-gravitic coupling wave. This denotes a theoretical area of research applicable to normal matter only, actively investigated by scientists interested in the concept of relating electromagnetism to gravity. I should stress that the relationship between magnetism and gravity is conjecture and nothing has been experimentally verified, only mathematically argued. However, I have included this possibility in the illustration because it applies to normal matter only and is a mainstream scientific area of research. This area of research is considered radical, but it is not fringe science. You can also see the electro-gravitic coupling wave. This denotes a propagating effect which inhibits the absorption and emission of gravitons into and out of the dark reservoir of quantum potential energy. Remember, we have defined one graviton as an entangled pair of conjugate photons. That is, the specific geometry of the element 115 nucleus generates a gravity A-wave signal which inhibits the particle creation annihilation process associated with the zero-point field. In the simplest possible terms, element 115 inhibits the Casimir effect. Let's now summarise what we've covered. In this episode, we have covered the key concepts discussed in the introduction. That is, we have presented a possible explanation for the manner in which element 115 may be operating in terms of physical principles. We have proposed two significant contributors, the first of these being a change in the phase difference between electric and gravitational forces from 90 degrees for normal matter to 0 or 180 degrees for element 115 due to the specific geometry of its nucleus. Consequently, the second significant contributor being that element 115 acts as a quantum vacuum inhibitor, suppressing the absorption of gravitons into the quantum vacuum and suppressing the virtual photon pair creation annihilation process associated with accelerated cosmological expansion. That is, the simplest way to express the manner in which element 115 may be working is that it inhibits, that is, suppresses, the Casimir effect. Hence, simplistically speaking, no Casimir effect equals no space-time curvature. So, in summary, we have established a possible explanation for the manner in which element 115 may be working based upon quantum mechanics, specifically quantum probabilities. This is a far cry from the explanation offered by Bob Lazar. However, once again, we stress that the contents of this episode are purely conjecture. The conclusions presented may be incorrect, so viewer discretion is advised.